Welcome to my set review for the first set of AlteredTCG. I'm going to be giving a grade to all the cards based on a little bit of simulator play and just my first impressions for fun to try to guess how much play they'll see later on. I'm going to use the A grade to mean if I think a card is probably going to be in most of the main decks in a few months after things settle in. So that's the guessing game. But this starting one is not going to get the A grade. So this first one here is Axiom Salvager, played from reserve resupply. I think this is not the best way to draw a card using a rare point. There's a few others in Bravos, and there's also a few other good one-drops in Bravos. So I'm going to give this one a D. This is Three Little Pigs, which is a very flavorful card, but almost everyone agrees that this is not very good because the average amount of stats is just very low. I'm going to give this a D as well. I don't expect it to be good enough. This is Foundry Armorer. You get 2 bodies and 2 lanes, which can be really useful. And it does have the same amount of stats as like the very impressive Haven Warrior, but only on the second side. I think it's going to be really hard to compete for rare points. So I'm still going to have to give this like a B, but it does do something very interesting. And it does something you're not able to do by default in the faction. This is the heroes, which are thankfully early. Kojo and Buddha, I think, is the second best Bravos hero based on how the initial set looks. He gives unconditional stats, but has fewer synergies with Bravos cards. So he's really going to be the most flexible hero and probably the most aggressive hero, just because you can throw out a mixture of aggressive cards without needing to sculpt them to a specific ability like the other two. I'm going to give him a B for being the second best, but I might be wrong about that. A 2/2 token is very good. It both adds stats to your board and gives you more flexibility about how to play the turn because you've already put at least 1 point into one of the lanes. This is Atsadian Surge. 2 things I dislike about Atsadian Surge. One is that he does not fix your mulligan, which almost all sources of card draw in card games help you with your mulligan, like accidentally, except for the ones that, cost a whole lot of mana, and those are often unsuccessful. The other thing I don't like is that there's other ways to draw cards. The systems in Altereds give you lots of creative ways to draw cards, and I don't think you need to do this. It's a lot harder to find a creative way to gain stats for 0 mana, which both Kojo and Basira are helping you do. I'm going to give this a D. This is Basira and Kaizaimon. Basira and Kaizaimon gets a similar amount of stats to Kojo and Buddha, but Basira is able to move the stats to the position she wants them to be on, and she's also able to surprise the opponent more with where the stats go. She can even apply the boost on your very last action of the turn, whereas Kojo always tells you where the Buddha token is. For that reason, I think she has a little bit higher of a power cap, and it's not going to be hard to use the Bravos cards to make sure she triggers so often that she's the same number of stats as Kojo, so I'm going to give her an A. This is Ratatosker. Ratatosker is a 1-mana 1/1/1, which is very powerful and altered because it lets you wait and see what your opponent is going to do. And having 1 stat in each point of terrain gives you the most flexibility to be doing that. The backside triggers Basira and gives you a character that's on rate on its own. So I'm going to give this an A. This is a rare version. I think you're fine with just the common version. This is Isamboshi. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It has poorer stats than most 1-drops, but the next character you play from reserve can gain 1 boost. It is appreciable that this is a flexible way to work with Basira, but I like this effect more on the higher cost characters because I find in games that I want to play my 1-cost characters twice because that wait and see what they did ability is something I end up wanting to do twice because it's just very good to do many times throughout the game. So I expect Isamboshi to fail to compete with the other 1-drops. I'll give it a C. This isn't really addressing the concern. Now we can't even play it as a 1-drop the second time at all. For sake of completion, C. This is Tiny Jin. This is one of the ones where I think you want to just go ahead and consider the rare right away. I'll give the common a C. Because the common is so much cheaper. When I leave the expedition zone, if I'm boosted, put me in the owner's mana zone. So that means no matter how it leaves the expedition zone, it becomes an exhausted mana orb. And if you're having trouble finding a way to boost it, you get the guarantee on the second part. I'm going to give this a cautious A, but I'm very worried that this is more work than it's worth. If you're applying the boost to it just to get the effect, it's kind of like you might be throwing stats away. But the ceiling is just very, very good, and getting to do the 1-drop thing once is a big upside to the card. This is a very famous Bravos card, the Bravos Tracer. It's in the starter deck. Bravos Tracer is really good because it lets you do something on your turns that isn't expected out of that amount of mana. And it's possible to mitigate the downside of having a fleeting characters by designing the rest of your deck and making your mana zone decisions such that you will not run out of cards to play. For that reason, I would give Bravos Tracer an A. My feeling on the rare version is that it is a B, even though it is significantly better than the common version on stats. But it is possible to want to play the Bravos Tracer at the beginning of a turn instead of at the end, even though I highlighted the reactive potentials of the cards, I find the proactive use is good too. And the low mountain stat makes it not do much better than the common when you're using it more proactively. This is a Bravos Pathfinder, which I will have to give a D and the common form because having a 0 stat makes a card not work very well on the first turn of the game. And the first turn of the game is a turn of the game where the 2-cost cards are important to be in your deck. If you could start the game at the end, you maybe wouldn't put that many 2-cost cards in your deck at all. This one is much more exciting because it is going for the seasoned effect where you could grow a really big one, and the second time you play it, you get all the boosts for free. And then the 2 cost suddenly has a lot more purpose because it allows you to spend the leftover mana from a certain turn adding boosts to it so that the seasoned effect gets more powerful. I am going to rate this a B because it does more things. but I still don't like the base card, and I'm not sure I want to spend a rare point on it when I have to deal with a body that wasn't that good to begin with. Haven Trainee has an imbalanced stat line, but it's not as imbalanced as the Bravos Pathfinder, which makes it more useful. I'm going to give it an A, because I think it's a pretty good way to start a lane, a pretty good way to answer plays on the forest sometimes. And if you look at what 2-drops are available to you, this might be what you go for, especially if you don't want to spend your rare points on 2-drops, which I think you might not want to. The second play gets 2 boosts and becomes 5/3/3, which is kind of fine. This one is even better because you do dislike the 4-cost version of it more than the 2-cost version of it. I think the rare slot is pretty competitive, so this is still going to be a B. I think we're going to jump at the chance to play a 2-cost at the common level, and the 4-cost version is not going to be embarrassing when you have to play it instead of using a support effect. But I could be wrong. This could be the fastest way to start getting the boost going in Basira. I would definitely rather use this to get the boost going in Basira than the Isonboshi. This is Red. She's a simple 2/2 with Seasoned, and I am over the moon about her. She's an A+. I really like that she has 2/2/2 stats, which does not get outclassed very much at a similar mana amount if you look at the whole set. And then she has a special effect that you can go for when you want to go for, but you don't have to go for because she's doing so well on her own. And she also might give you the opportunity to play enough cheap cards in aggregate, because she herself costs 2, that your opponent has spent down enough mana that they can't remove her. Because putting a lot of counters on a seasoned character could possibly risk removal. This one I don't like as much. You get to draw a card if you have 3 or more boosts, but you're already happy if you have 3 or more boosts. This is doing something in a position where you may not need that effect. I also am wary of card draw effects that you can't use to fix problems. You can't use to find cards when you have problems. And if you have a red and a way to boost, your hand didn't really have a problem in the first place. This is not how I would want to spend my rare point. She also gets more expensive on the second play. D. This is Chiron, which is a 2/2/2, just like Red, and he's probably better because of the Basira trigger, but the ceiling is lower than Red. So this will be another A. I guess retroactively maybe Haven Trainee is lower than an A because there's enough of these other good 2-drops in Bravos. I would pick these two. In Kojo, I would still pick the Chiron, but maybe would want the Haven Trainee because it has a tendency to be aggressive. I don't think you need this version. This is pretty interesting. It has a little more stats and can sling the boosts all around the board, but you don't get bonus boosts with Basira, and I think it'll be difficult to set up multiple seasons with this. This is Hua Mulan. You can play Hua Mulan from reserve as many times as you want, but she won't have amazing stats any of those times. I think this is a D because you are kind of it's one of those cards that I feel is like a consigning. You're consigning yourself to something that is not amazing and that will probably lose to something even stronger. 3 mana for 1/3/3 is a lot better than the worst case scenarios when clunky hands are not letting you play even a 3/3/3, but it's not going to compete with a strong board. This one is interesting because it becomes more of an after you card. It's like halfway to that 1-drop where you get to play a cheap card and see what your opponent does. But I think this kind of card doesn't really let you be aggressive like Kojo would want to, and it doesn't really set up Basira, and it doesn't really set up Atsadi, so it kind of has a problem where it's not really synergizing with what any of the characters are trying to do in particular. It may do better in the second set. Let's go see. It's higher than D because I think this is offering you the ability to play a strategy that's just not anywhere else in the Bravo set file. Kappa is a 4/5/5. I think it's pretty nice to use a common and get something that will hold its own in a lane as consistently as Kappa. I'm going to give Kappa a B, despite saying that I'm not quite getting to an A, because I think cobbling together the other commons with synergistic cards or with good control of whose turn it is, with cheap cards to see where to put a smaller number of stats might actually be better than Kappa. And cards that cost more than 3 can be a liability in the sense. Once they get into reserve, you need to play them for 4 from reserve, which is why Haven Trainee is my least favorite 2-drop. And you can overflood the reserve if you can't pay 4. This means that this Kappa mitigates that downside. It has a support ability, and this Kappa has Seasoned, although 4 leaves not much mana to work with the Seasoned effect. I'm going to give this, I think I'll give this an A. At some point you have to start taking some of these support abilities that give a boost, because they really help you get some spike turns. And this is probably one of the ones I would like to take, because it's resolving the problem of not wanting to play it for 4 the second time. Bravo's Vanguard. You may have another target character lose fleeting. I think this card can be powerful, but it doesn't work with any hand you draw. If you draw your cards in a certain order, it is pretty possible for this effect just to do nothing, because the only time you can play it on a fleeting character, it's when you know you'd never want to play again. Characters don't always leave you 3 mana at the time that they are going out there with fleeting. I'm going to give this a B, because it could hit. It can be pretty useful when it does hit, and the stat line is not super low for trying to make this work. Here's the rare version where you also gain 1 boost, and because it's losing fleeting, it will always work well with a Seasoned ability when you give it that boost. I think we're kind of doubling down on the finickiness of this effect and how there's a specific condition that needs to be met. It's less flexible than the Kappa we just looked at, for instance. So I'm going to go all the way down to C on this one. This is a Haven Bouncer. Haven Bouncer will sabotage a card, and the second time you play it, it'll be a 3/3, and a 3/3 with boost synergies. I'm going to give this one a, let's say an A. Sabotage fits the Bravos game plan in a couple ways. Bravos doesn't have removal that's cheaper than the thing it's removing in the same way that Ysmir does. And Bravos is often trying to win lanes early on. So Sabotage can be effective on specific plays that would spend your opponent's mana really efficiently. And if they have extra cards at the end of the game because they spent mana inefficiently, it's not really a problem if you beat them early. Here's the rare version, just gets an additional boost on the backside. I usually don't want 1 point of size on just only one side of the card for a rare point, so I'll give this a C. Bravos Blade Dancer. This one is a 1/1/1 on the front side, which we were excited about on the AlteredTCG. But on the back side, you need to pay 3 mana to get 1 boost, and the idea is that you're going to use a season, so you'll be a little more excited about the second form. You're kind of creating your own problem just to solve it instead of getting a card with genuine upside when you do this. So I'm going to give this a D. I think 1-drops are really good, but you're either going to play one of the other 1-drops or spend a rare point on a 1-drop to do better than a 3 mana version on the back half. This is one of the ones you might spend a rare point to get, because this is a pretty compelling outcome. You get to play it for 3 over and over again, and some of those plays for 3 are significantly bigger than Mulan. The rules for this works that it can have 4 boosts when it comes back, and you can go up to a 5th and still lose the fleeting, as long as you choose to lose the fleeting first. I'm going to give this one an A. You're asking a lot and needing to do a big thing here, but there's a big advantage to actually doing it, and it's pretty flexible to do it. You can just play this for 1 at any point in the game where it helps out, and you've kind of already gotten half the value out of the card. Haven Warrior. Both the common and rare version of this card are very, very good. It can become a 4/4/4 that gives the next character you play this turn 1 boost. I'm going to give just both of them an A, thinking you'll play either of them. I think you'll probably play the common one, but the rare one is also very, very good. I like playing this on the first turn of the game because it does, while it loses to a 3/3/3, it doesn't get blown out by a 3/3/3 and advances with it. And some opening hands will just let you win outright with an only a 4/2/4. So the common version is my favorite, but that might be wrong. This is Sun Wukong. 4/6/4 the second time you play it for 4. And a little smaller than that the first time. I don't like that this one is focused on playing a card for 4 from your reserve, because that can be an inflexible thing to do sometimes. So I'm going to give this a D. And this one merges the idea of Mulan with the idea of having big mountains. You can play it over and over again. This actually compounds the problem of playing a card for 4. For instance, on turn 7, if you want to play a different card for 4, well, you can't play it. And that might mean that like on turn 6 you had the same problem, that you wanted to play a different card for 4 and you couldn't play it. Because you needed to be doing this because, you know, you spent a rare point worth of power of your deck on this, or because your reserve is getting too full, so the card, playing cards from your hand is going to like overflood. And even though you may feel like you can play cards forever and ever, this could get sabotaged when you don't expect it. So you still need to manage your overflood in case that happens, possibly. I think this is probably a D. It would be stronger if it had balanced stats in every biome, so that every time you play it over and over again, you know it's going to be good. But I think the developers knew that, and that's why they created the risk here. This is Mighty Jin. You ramp mana when it leaves the expedition zone. That's a common. The rare sometimes gives you a card. The rare is like a D. You don't want to play it. The common is very, very good. It has a 0 stat, which is asking you to be careful about how you play it. But it's giving you a very powerful effect, and you don't need to enable it with a boost like the Tiny Jin. So I'm going to give this... I'll still give it a B. No, I'll give it an A. It isn't doing the things the heroes encourage you to be excited about, but it has so much raw power that it will probably perform like an A. This is Atlas. I'll give the common version a D because it puts a 3/3 in every lane, but you tend to see your opponent win one of those lanes because 4/4/4 is not that hard to do. And then you have this 5 cost in your reserve, and you're going into turn 6 where that's not clean. You're going into turn 7 where that's not clean. And there's even a risk that a 3/3/3 loses both lanes. It can happen. This does not have the problem with regards to playing it the second time. And then it has the high roll where you can give boosts. You can give your boosts both gigantic and give them seasoned. I think this is still going to be a... Oh, how do I remove that? Oh, this button. I still think this is going to be like a C. The 2 boosts can't get into the reserve very easily because you have to play the card, and there's still some risk involved in playing the card. And you're spending a rare point. I think if this was a common, I'd slam automatically play it, but you are spending a rare point for boosts that can only happen late in the game. This is Achilles. Achilles is hard to target and has pretty good stats. I like Achilles better than Atlas in some ways, but Achilles also isn't planning to 2-0 lanes or anything. He's going for just a 1/1. He's not very exciting. I will give him a C. This Achilles is still not very exciting, and I think people will play characters and not worry about the even higher ward. I'll go down to a D. Shenlong. This is a 6-mana 8/8. The nice thing about Shenlong is there's no risk of losing the lane like there is with Atlas and to a lesser extent Achilles. You're probably not going to do poorer than advancing 1 lane and losing 1 lane, which I've referred to as 1/1 so far. And when you pay 6 mana for 1 card, you kind of get an advantage on cards because you didn't use 2 cards to play a 6 mana turn like you normally would. I will give Shenlong a B. It is a little hard to play the second half of it, and I think you will probably be able to stitch smaller cards together to have a better outcome than Shenlong, but I'm really optimistic. This Shenlong has Tough 1 and is a little bigger. I think you don't really want to spend a rare point for Tough 1 because you would need more than 1 point of tax on a removal to make losing the Shenlong not scary. It's kind of still scary at Tough 1. So I'm going to give this a D. If I'm afraid of my opponent removing my Shenlong, I'm probably not going to play either the rare or the common Shenlong. This is Tomoe Gaozen. I don't know how to pronounce that. Can't be played if you have less than 7 mana orbs. This is one of my favorite cards in the first set because you play cheap cards in late turns a lot in Altered because Altered isn't a tableau builder like a few other games in the genre. So I think this is a B. It still suffers from imbalanced stat lines, and later in the game you can be asked for specific stats that may include Forest, and that's compounding with the risk from early in the game, but it's much stronger than a C, because playing a 3-drop on 7 mana orbs is actually a really normal thing to do the way Altered works. This is like a D because you should be playing the common version. 6 mana orbs to 7 is obviously a pretty mild difference, and just the structure of Altered, it's really not a big deal to be playing small cards late. So if you agree with that idea, you won't want to spend an entire rare point on this. Kybera Leviathan. This has 6/6/6 Gigantic. That's more stat points per mana than the Atlas, and Tough X, where X is like how far from winning you are. I think the risk that you just don't reach 8 mana before you are running out of other cards in your hand to be playing to participate in the game is high enough that even though I would like playing this, I'm afraid to play it. So I'm going to give this a C. Let's see if the rare costs 7. No, the rare costs 9. So yeah, it's significantly bigger. Wait, oh, I dropped it. I was trying to check. 2 in each stat bigger to try to give you some stronger faith that it will be harder to 2-0 and perhaps even harder to match at a 1-1 even. But at 9 mana, I'm even less sure that I'll be able to get to 9 mana without skipping a turn or playing a really inefficient turn. Oh, let's say a D. Ouroboros Trickster. This is one of those ones that gives you a 1 cost on the backside. This averages, this is a 1.5, 1.5, 1.5 on average, which is not a perfect proxy for the actual things it will do, but a decent one at a set review level. I think these cards that are a 1 cost on the backside, it's important that the front side be easy to play, and that condition is met here. I think what the problem is here is that we saw a lot of other ways to access 1 cost without spending a rare point, and we're not doing anything exceptional on either the first or second play here. So I'm going to give this a D, unfortunately. It does synergize with Viscera, which is why it's in the set, but we can probably find pick the other ways to do that. Maybe even some of the support ability boost counters I passed up on. Or just Keylon Cylinder is a really powerful card that will be in a different video. Tanuki. Tanuki lets you sabotage, which lets you increase the number of sabotages in your deck by spending a rare point. The stat line is imbalanced, which is less of a sin on a 3-drop than on a 2-drop, I think. We'll give this a C. I think you'll use the 3 copies of your in-faction sabotage and call it a day, and not spend rare points. Lyra Navigator. This is interesting because of how aggressive it is, but I think there's other ways to be aggressive besides imbalanced stats, like the Intimidate card, the Bravo's Tracer card. So I'm going to give this a D. Sorry. The Hatter. This is a very exciting card because it lets you use the Anchor 3 or less effect outside of Muna, which gets the most of this effect. And it has a lot of synergy with some small characters that are some small costed characters that are very big in Bravos, like the Bravo's Tracer and like the Haven Warrior. It does require you to find a biome suited to it either on turn 2, or if you miss it on turn 2, turn 3 is awkward because you need a 1-drop. So maybe on turn 4. What I'm getting at with that sounding unenthusiastic is that when I've played it, that has been kind of an issue, especially when you're trying to maintain pressure with an aggressive strategy. And this isn't helping you directly with the Basira strategy, although it does double down if you can anchor something with boosts. I'm going to give this a C. I think we'll stick with the in-faction seasoned ability when we're trying to double the power of boosts instead of using this, because a lot of those seasoned characters have even biome stats, so they're easier to get onto the field. This is Asmodeus. Half the time you get an anchor, half the time you get boosts. Asmodeus is not different enough from Shenlong for us to want to spend rare points, although there is an anchored possibility that's different from him. So I will give Asmodeus a C. This is a Kitsune. Each player draws draws 1 card. This can give you an advantage if you're trying to make your companion and hero meet before either player has used all their cards, or at least before your opponent has used all their cards. But I think you want to spend your rares on something higher impact. I'll give this a B, but this is a pretty exciting rare. Dracana. Gains 1 anchored, and at noon gains a boost. You can't really anchor it further except with Mad Hatter in the Bravos faction because you don't have the Muna cards that this is designed to work with. However, Basira does naturally riff off of the anchored, and this is a more direct way to use anchored than the Mad Hatter. I will give this an A. I think I would want to try this. It is pretty hard to evaluate, but I'm trying to be brave and make mistakes here. I like that I can use Basira effects on it, and I like that it is 2 bodies just off the gun. One of the bodies is very weak. The next one is is hopefully not weak because of synergies, but 2 bodies can just be good in general. Asia. Each player puts the top card of their deck into their mana zone. I'll give this a D. I think even the other teams that don't have a direct way to use lots of mana will find ways to use lots of mana, especially because of the way reserve costs work. You can have reserve costs that you designed your deck not to play those reserve costs. You designed your deck to use the support ability, but if someone suddenly gives you an extra mana, you will be able to use the extra mana by playing those cards a second time instead. And that makes it hard to make sure that the mana zone card benefits you but doesn't benefit your opponent. Parvati. Target character gains anchored. If I hadn't played this one in the simulator, I don't think I would be as low on it as I am, but I am pretty low on it. 4 is a lot to spend the same turn as whatever you're trying to work on is getting played. I'll give this a D. And I'm kind of surprised it's a D, but that is how it has worked out for me in the past. And of course, similar to the Mad Hatter, we have struggles with playing it on its ideal turn if the biomes don't directly say that we can. Son of Yggdrasil. It has Gigantic, so it works well with boosts, and it's somewhat of a halfway point between the Atlas and the Kybera on costs. This is just worse than Atlas because you're probably not going to find a mono forest biome, so you're just making it harder to have enough mana to spend to add the boosts to it. So this is a D. Ozma. If you control 2 or more other boosted characters, draw a card. This is an A. If you boost one character, Basira says that you can throw a boost at another character. So we only have to play an unboosted character and a boosted character and then an Ozma. And that's pretty feasible once you have about 7 mana orbs on the 4th turn. And drawing a card is a good benefit to get on a character that has stats that are reasonable on their face. And I'm willing to spend a rare point on this. Usually Ozma has played well for me. But that has been with Ordis. She wasn't spoiled until recently. The Council. 4 for 4. This is what you get if you really like the stat line of Kappa enough to go for a slightly weaker one. And or you might believe in this effect, but it's possible to play around this effect and play it to the other lane sometimes. I'll give this a D. I'd rather use the rare point differently. You can play your Kappa twice if you really like the Kappa. The common Kappa is not that bad. This is once again an opportunity to increase the number of sabotages in Bravos. And this time there's an interesting effect on the backside where you create a presence in both expeditions, which can be advantageous in a way independent of how much stats you're adding. I will give this a B. I think there will be just a few hard-hitting sabotages, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is really good because of the flexibility that comes from playing a card from reserve and getting 2 bodies when you do it. Tooth Fairy. This sabotages but only from hand and does give you a 2-cost card both times if you want something that's the next best thing to a 1-cost card for waiting and seeing. I'm going to give this a D. I think it's probably okay to pay a lot of mana for your sabotage effects, because you can just not play them at all if the sabotage effect isn't going to hit hard enough. Lady of the Lake. The next character you play this turn loses fleeting. This is a very powerful and exciting support ability, but it can be harder to use than it looks. You aren't always sure when the big character with fleeting is going to happen. Someone can present you several turns in a row where a Bravos Tracer is overkill, and this can keep being in reserve, and you can keep not really being able to play it. I'll give this a C. It costs you a rare point. And the stats aren't making the case. Dorothy Gale is removal you can get with a rare point. You may send target character to reserve. I think the spells provide some pretty good options for removal in Bravos. And 5 is quite a lot to pay. I was thinking a little bit, but I'll give this a C. Sakurabru. Your opponent's expedition facing mine moves backwards 1 region. Sakurabru is interesting because it's so small relative to its mana that you're already thinking about the 1 expedition your opponent will get back because of its stats. But if you were going to lose both lanes anyway, it's a very powerful effect to do. If you can find a way not to lose both lanes, it's a very powerful effect to do. But overall, it's asking an exciting question that I don't necessarily know the answer to, about whether we can accomplish those kinds of things. So I'm going to give it a... No, let's go D. And this is a promo, so that's all the cards. I hope you liked the video. Next I'll be doing the spells and permanents for Bravos. And eventually I'm hoping to get through all 6 factions. Thank you for watching.